If you use AI or you're thinking about using AI, or if you are working with students who use AI, there are three things you've got to know, three main concepts to make sure the AI is used productively and appropriately. And that's what we're going to talk about here. These are the three main concepts you have to understand. That the outputs are probabilistic. They are built on probabilities, not correctness, and they're not definitive answers. That AI systems, they're tools, and they are built and have limitations, and that ultimately it's the way that the human, you, and the AI interact that determines its usefulness. Now, each one of these main concepts has got some implications in practice that we're going to walk through. First, let's take a look at the first main concept, the fact that outputs are based on probabilities, most likely answers, most typical, most common, as opposed to the most right. And that's really what this is saying here. It's the probable language which is being produced, not necessarily the correct language. And oftentimes we say, wow, that's very well written. It must be right. But the fluency, the presentation doesn't mean it's accurate. It just means it's well presented. And as a result of this, where we see AI most appropriately applied is not in getting a task and doing something for us. Here's your task, here's your product. But being a part of a larger process where we are using it for that first draft look, and then we still have work to do after that ourselves. And what that means is when it produces an output, you got to look at it. You have to verify, is this appropriate? Is this correct? Does this accomplish my purpose? And the key to doing that is you got to know your stuff. And there's a paradox, which is the people who know most about a topic are the ones who probably can use AI the best because you have that ability to verify and to interpret and understand the output. Which means ultimately you, the human, you are responsible. So whether it's a good output or a bad output, once you put your name on it and give it to somebody else, you're the one who's accountable. So you've got to look at it pretty carefully. Now, this brings us to the second major concept, which is that AI systems are not people. They are tools that people use. And these tools, because they are people created, they have some limitations that we have to be aware of. But the most important thing is to remember it is a tool for you and your students to use. It is not the end goal. It's how you get to the end goal. So let's look at some of the takeaways from this. First of all, AIs are limited by what information they have access to. If they don't have information or the information is incorrect, that's going to affect the output. And then what the AI system does is it takes that information and it applies that next token, that next word prediction, its system to produce an output. So there are some systematic structural constraints on how those responses are even built and created in the first place. Along with that, AIs can't think of everything. When you and I think of something, we have a whole lifetime of experience and knowledge that we can apply. The AI doesn't. It has some very serious constraints called context windows, basically how much can it think about at one time. Now, they're getting bigger, but they are still not complete. They're not everything it's ever experienced ever in the entire world as much as you have. It has some constraints about how much it can think about at once. Now, with that in mind, the training systems and the information that's available in mind, now we have to match that up to what you wanted to do. And sometimes there's not a perfect match, which means you're not going to get a perfect response from it because there's not always a true perfect alignment between what you need and what the AI is able to produce for you. One of the results of that is what we call hallucinations. Now, hallucinations basically mean the AI confidently states something that is just made up. And they're getting better at that. The systems aren't as bad as they used to be. But the AIs are going to try to give you what you need. And if it can't do it, it's not in the information it's got access to, there's a risk. It's just going to make something up. So you got to think pretty carefully there. There's also the issue about the way it's designed. The people who build and run and maintain and develop these have some constraints of their own around safety and protection and bias and sensitive topics. So there are some built-in safeguards which can also influence the type of output that you get. Good thing, bad thing, a little bit hard to say, but the fact is there is a constraint there which is built into the system itself. One of the things AIs don't do is they don't look back at their work and say, oh, that sounds great. I think that's correct. They can be prompted to do that, but they're not going to do that naturally unless they're instructed to do so. And a part of that is they cannot say, I am 100% sure about this. Now, I always ask for a level of certainty. And, sometimes it's really great and sometimes it's not so great. But it doesn't have the ability to do that unless it is prompted and given the parameters for certainty by you. A good response looks like this. A bad one looks like that, and so on. You can do it, but it's not built into the system. And the last part of it is AIs are not people. They don't have values. They don't have judgments. They don't have goals. They don't have intents. They don't have a moral standing. This is something that you have to bring to the table. And that brings us to the third major concept, which is the way that you interact with the AI that's going to determine whether or not the outputs are useful to you and whether or not the experience and the process is valuable. Your interaction determines the quality of the outputs. Now, there's some risk. Some people will say, oh, the AI said it, must be right. That's a problem because it's not always right. But at the same time, people can say, AIs make mistakes, I ain't going to use them, right? And that's a problem also because now you don't get some of the benefits that you can get out of using AI. And one of the big things we talk about with students now is if we get AI to do the work, are you actually developing your own ability to reason as well? So we have to be aware that cognitive offloading can be an issue, but where we see the best use of AI is when we start with our own thinking and our own reasoning and then use the AI to extend and expand upon it. Not give away the cognitive task, but use it to support our own cognitive process. Now, as we are interacting, we have to be aware of the fact that the instructions that we give to the AI are going to directly determine the outputs that we get. And at the same time, the way we interpret the outputs is going to determine whether or not we think that they're valuable to us. So we always have to be aware of instructions and interpretation, or cognitive processes, basically. It's metacognition, which is going to help make the most out of AI. Now, along with that, thinking of metacognition, we have to think about our purpose. If we are prompting the AI to confirm our assumptions, it's going to do it, and we end up with what's called confirmation bias. So what we really want to see is iteration, where the first output is not the final output, that we go back and we think and we refine and we re-prompt and we rework until we get exactly what we need. And a part of that is just to say, you got to be skeptical. You look at it and say, okay, what's wrong? What's right? What's good? What's not good? You have to be critical about the outputs. The end result is a collaborative process where we are not simply saying, go out and do it, AI, but we're going to work on it together as a part of a longer process. And that's where we really get value out of AI systems. Ultimately, it's on you. It's on the user. Your skill in using the AI and your judgment and your thinking that you bring to the table is going to be the most important aspect and conditioned for using AI well. So our big takeaways, you got to look at outputs carefully. You have to recognize that they have constraints and that we have to kind of work around them or take them into the process. But ultimately, it's the way that you're interacting which is going to determine the value that you get. So there you go. 3 main concepts you have to understand and help your students understand when they're using AI. I hope you found this useful. Take care.